radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Today is August 3rd, 2017. I want to thank you for joining us. We are here in Federal Way. I'm up north doing some business, and I'm staying at my niece's house. So if in about 45 minutes some babies start squawking and screaming in the background, that's why. I won't be able to control that. They get up and they're ready to eat. So I want to thank you for joining us. Today we have with us a returning friend of our show, Crow, who is a shaman, an American shaman, trained shaman. And he just got back from a trip. His website is called ShamanicVoyages. They just got back from a trip from Mongolia. So, Crow, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Lonnie. It's nice to be back.
Yeah. So you just completed a good long journey to Mongolia. Do you want to share that with us?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is our long-anticipated maiden voyage. We just started the organization several months ago with a vision to take people who are studying shamanism to cultures where shamanism still plays an active part in the culture. So Mongolia was our first destination, and we did it with we partnered with ShamanicVoyages, which is a Mongolian travel company that knows their way around the country and so forth. It made our first time much easier, and I'm grateful to them. And my partner from France, who uses the name Nanook, helped me to organize and orchestrate this trip, and we were very pleased with the results. We had 10 participants that came with us, and I couldn't have asked for a better mix of people, a great variety of personalities, and everybody said it was a real peak experience.
Well, that's really awesome. So, that they're pretty isolated, aren't they, where they live? I mean, they're a pretty isolated area.
Yeah, that's always been the case for Mongolia, and the reason being is that it's desolate in a lot of ways. It's not suited to agriculture because of the thinness of the soil. There is some wooded area, but mostly it's pasture land and desert. And for most of the history of mankind, it just didn't have what it took to build agricultural civilization. So the way of life has been nomadic, since the ice ages, pretty much. It was only until the Soviet takeover that urbanization began to take place, and that's really only in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. And today, about half of the population of the country lives there for most of the year. The other half of the population still lives in traditional ways, herding, and well, that's about all they do.
Is herding.
Is herding.
So that's what you were doing. You were with the herders. This is a group of people that you were with, or were you in the city?
Well, we arrived, of course, at the international airport in Ulaanbaatar. We spent one night there. The Orso Voyages has a camp just outside of town in what they call a gur village. Gur is the local word for what we would recognize as a yurt, a circular building that is covered with felt and sometimes some other modern fabrics as well. And it has a peaked roof and generally would have a wood stove inside. I'm sure, long ago they had an open fire, but now they generally have a wood stove with a pipe going up through the center. They're all oriented the same direction with the door to the south, and that's a tradition that has been in practice for a very long time and is based upon the prevailing winds and the fact that most foul weather comes in from the north, and that allows you to enter and exit without having the wind blowing right in the door behind you.
Yeah. What was the purpose of the trip with these people that you went? What were you doing there?
Well, in our vision statement and in our stated mission is to kind of meet other shamanic cultures and kind of exchange our ways, if you will. To understand their worldview a little better and to share with them principles of core shamanic practice that we use here in the West, or at least many of our participants do. And largely to also raise awareness about protecting the earth and protecting water resources. That's something that is very important to virtually every shamanic culture, is the sacredness of the earth and our connection to the earth spirits, and a real concern for what has happened in modern times and how people no longer have that connection in many cases, and oftentimes are actively living a lifestyle that is harming the earth, and that's something that cannot continue to be perpetuated for very long without everyone suffering for it. So,
I mean, I'm a bit surprised that there are not more shamanic practitioners who are actively engaged in stopping the nuclear and chemical warfare on our planet.
Well, actually, there probably are more involved than you're aware of, although
no doubt.
The nature of shamanism, the way we work is not so much on the front lines as activists, although that's starting to happen more. And in our case, we're not so much standing in picket lines, but we're trying to find our way to making our message heard by a wider audience. It's like you are using the radio waves to do a lot of your activism work and your education, and we're trying to start to do something similar, but from a spiritual perspective rather than a political perspective, if you will. The power of prayer and the power of ceremony and ritual cannot be underestimated. It really does, I believe, have an effect on things. Actually, it's not just a matter of belief. I see it demonstrated all the time, in small ways and in large ways. One interesting thing about our trip is that we arrived in a period of long absence of rain, and rain followed us throughout the countryside. Wherever we showed up, rain started to follow, and people began to make comments about about the rain following us.
Like your work was actually working. It was like a testimony to the work that you're doing.
I don't know if I would put it that way exactly, but I believe that the strong intention that we brought for harmony and working for the earth, coincided with some very positive things in the natural world. So, I don't know what to say about cause and effect. We don't do these things. These things are done by the spirit world, or the spirits of nature, or the forces of nature, however you feel comfortable referring to it. And I believe that when you embrace the natural world in a healing way, you're gonna experience some good things. I can't begin to list all the ways that we really felt what's the word, validated in our work. It wasn't just doing work for the earth, but also there was some interpersonal things that were going on and that happened that were very powerful. We had without going into too many details that may be personal, we had a personal crisis of one of the, I don't know about a crisis, but for lack of a better word, I'll use that, with one of our participants who was emotionally distraught over something that happened, and the healing support in the circle, we were holding ceremony at the time when she shared about this, was very strong. And then out of nowhere, an entire flock of, it was mixed sheep and goats, just came across the valley and circled the circle that we had set up out there. We set up a circle with stones at the cardinal directions and so forth, and we held ceremony while we stood in a circle, and all these animals came around, and as we were, embracing and supporting each other, it was phenomenal. That was just one example of the really magical things that were happening.
You mean the animals circled you guys? Yeah,
they just kind of came up, and the flock surrounded us. They didn't come into the circle, but they surrounded it, and it was, it was very moving. And it was just one example of how we felt that there was really a strong connection being made, with each other and with our surroundings, and the animals almost seemed to participate oftentimes. I'll tell you, there is nothing like seeing herds of semi-wild horses, first thing in the morning when you come out of your gur or your tent. They're just running free, pretty much. The nomadic herders, basically, all they do is they keep these herds in the same valley that they're occupying. There are no real fences or anything like that to keep any of these animals in, but they pretty much just ensure that the flocks and the herds that they're working with stay nearby to their encampment. And when they move the animals along with them. So I don't think that the animals really have any sense of being restrained. Occasionally they interact with people who are, try to head them one way or another, but for the most part, they're living just as they would in the wild. And of course, there are exceptions with individuals because some of them are used and taken for meals and so forth, but even their practices of dispatching animals are far more humane than you see in so-called advanced society. They're killed quickly. They are, taken with a great deal of respect, and I don't know if I would call it ceremony, but certainly a great deal of attention and mindfulness in the slaughter and the use of the animal, and they don't waste anything either. They use just about everything.
Well, so they don't actually slaughter an animal, and do they take it to market and sell it, or do they just use it for their own community?
No, they use it for their own community. There is, I'm sure, near the cities, clearly to supply the demand. There are people who will bring things in for trade. The Nadam Festival, which is a national event for about a week in Mongolia. We were there just prior to that, so we saw a lot of people preparing for that, and that's like county fair on a national scale. People will come miles and miles around to whatever the local population center is, the place where the school
Yeah.
is. And at that point in time, people will bring, prized animals for trade, race, or whether they be good breeding stock or goats, yaks, or any of the animals that they're, commonly using. So there is some exchange in that regard. But out in the countryside, no, there's no real trade. You're pretty much living off the land. In a lot of ways,
Crow, is there any talk about the mining that's out there? Because when we talked last time, I went to like the Google Maps, and out in that area where you were talking about going, there's like strip mining going on out there. You know how you said it's pretty arid and it's not much activity out there. Is there any discussion about any of that?
Well, that's another important point, and I'm glad you brought it up. Part of our mission in trying to be warriors for the earth and water protectors and so forth is to actually hone in on things that can be done. And this group that I've run across, the Save Noyon Mountain group,
Tiana,
they are...
Tiana, I put it in a jar up there. Look. I saw it.
Okay. They're actively working to protect the Noyon region from the damage that's taken place through mining, and so I've become connected with that movement and some of the people involved in it. And to put it in a nutshell, they're trying to protect not only natural resources but also cultural heritage resources, graves and cultural sites that are up in the mountain as well. And I believe that's the area that you saw the mining evidence. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of strip mining. It must be a big issue in that community because it looked like if you look at the map, when you go to Google Map, you can always like take a look and see. I always look around for uranium mines, right? But you can see strip mines and things like that in that area. And I was thinking that it must impact this community, especially since they're all nomadic.
Yeah. And the specific ways that the mining in particular is impacting them is, if you can picture a pastoral people who, move around a lot, they rely on wells, and a lot of their movements are based upon water sources, whether they be rivers or wells or whatever. And the mining has disturbed the natural arsenic that's in the soil and pretty much got it involved in the watershed. That's one bad thing. Wow. They've also drilled wells of their own for their needs in the mining operation, and they've actually drawn down the water table to a point where many of these traditional wells that have been used for tens of generations have gone dry. And this not only affects the livelihood of the nomadic people as far as not having the water that they need, but it's also kind of forced many of them into actually exploiting the mines that have been left behind because they need some way to survive. And they've gone into mines that have been left that were no longer productive on a commercial scale, and they're carrying on a practice that's known as ninja mining, where they basically go in with the clothes on their back and very rudimentary tools and by hand try to find things of value. And this is leading to further poisoning. It's, probably in some cases, in the case of uranium mines, certainly could be raising, cancer rates for all. And
birth defects, no doubt. I wonder what the birth defect rate is looking like out there.
And the other tragic thing is that sometimes in small spaces, you send the smallest person. So children are even involved in this ninja mining. And, it's tragic. Some people might, immediately point the finger at the parents and say, how can they, allow this? But in this culture, children, they race horses by the time they're 3 and 4 years old. They grow up in the saddle. As soon as you can, contribute to the welfare of your family by pitching in, you do. There's no question about whether you should or not. It's just the way things are done. So,
probably if you don't pitch in, things don't get done. It takes everybody to make it all work.
It does, and the mindset is, families are very tight and they work well together. So when they're forced into something like ninja mining, they're all going to work together there as well. So and we see it as being a deeper tragedy when children are involved. But it's just a tragedy, pure and simple, that this is happening. There are very few truly nomadic peoples left in the world, and this, I believe, is one of the largest areas where people live in those traditional ways. They certainly, know about technology. Many of the gurus will, see a solar panel, and they'll have a radio where they can, listen to music or the news or something like that. But for the most part, they live in very traditional ways. They only adopt things that fit into that lifestyle. Like, for instance, you will occasionally see a motorcycle taking part in herding horses. We got to witness that one day, where there was a particularly fast young stallion that was getting away from the herders who were trying to bring them in because there was a thunderstorm coming. They were the mounted young men who were trying to chase this horse down just couldn't get the better of him. So there's one little boy, he couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 years old, headed out on his motorcycle because he had a little bit more speed. And with his assistance, they ended up finally getting the horse into the corralled area. And then we had a wonderful thunderstorm.
So they're not really intent on changing their lifestyle. They're still embracing their traditional lifestyle. They're just picking some things to use and some things not.
Yeah. Yes, and they really honor their lifestyle and their ancestors, and they've been through a very difficult time because the Soviet Union just pulled out of there. During the collapse in the early 1990s, and they became an independent nation once again. And under the Soviets, they really suffered some real oppression when it came to their spiritual practices. Shamanism was outlawed. Actually, during the days of Stalin, shamans were actually hunted down and killed. They were practically wiped out. Shamanism, in the tradition that had developed there, continued to be practiced in very small, isolated areas. And once the Soviets pulled out, in just the space of one generation, basically the culture re-embraced shamanism, and now through the instruction of those who protected the tradition, they have a very strong, vibrant community of shamans again. And on our trip, we were accompanied by 3 shamans.
Wow.
They were all 3 of them were younger than I kind of expected. When it's like when you go in for surgery, you want to see gray sideburns on your doctors. Wow. Yeah. But it was very evident that all 3 of these young men were very committed, and they at first were a little bit difficult to communicate with, and there was a real difference culturally between us. But over time, we did genuinely develop a positive relationship. And in fact, there were a couple of interesting, funny little stories that took place. We had been out probably for about a week, and we were at this one particular encampment where we used tents because there was only one yurt in the valley, and that belonged to a family, and they certainly couldn't accommodate our group. We had 12 Westerners and a support staff of about 7 people.
Okay.
So we set up a couple of big tents, one for food preparation, one for taking food and meeting in, and then a bunch of little ones that we slept in. And so we took our meals sometimes outdoors, but this culture, like a lot of cultures, is somewhat there's a strong patrimony in a lot of things. It's not unusual for work to be divided along gender lines. Sometimes it's a common it's just a common tradition where no one really seems to have a problem with it. But in other cases, women oftentimes do end up with more menial things, and men oftentimes are deferred to. Now, we see this in a lot of cultures, and in our culture, we're trying to rise above that and work toward more equity. But this was here, and it wasn't our place to tell them what was wrong with their culture. But one evening, well, before I go into that, out of our group, one person or one woman was expected to assist with washing dishes after the meals. So when I found out about this, I announced that tonight I would be washing dishes, and a few eyebrows went up. More from the women than the men.
Yeah, I bet.
But I followed through. I did the dishes. It was you could tell that I was rocking the boat just a little bit, but we were all cordial enough that nobody really took offense. It was just kind of.
They probably expected it since you're a Westerner, like an American man. Okay.
Well, yeah, and I'm also traveling. Our group there were just two men in our group, myself and one participant, and the rest were women, which in shamanism in general and a lot of spiritual movements tends to be the case in the West. There's a lot more participation of women. But anyway, I did the dishes and so forth, and then the next day, when it came time for dinner to be served, the shamans themselves, three men, actually served us. They brought all the dishes. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, a little tit for tat there.
So they reflect, because before the women were bringing the meal.
Yeah, before the women were bringing the meals, the women were exclusively in the service part. The men were bringing food, collecting food. They were certainly sharing in the work. The staff members, but the women pretty much had the cooking and the serving and the cleaning was pretty much their realm up until then. So it was nice for them to reciprocate in.
Did you discuss that with them?
Pardon me?
Did you discuss that with them?
Just tangentially. There's a little joking about it, but we did have discussions not only about gender roles and the differences in our cultures, but also sexual orientation. That came up in conversation, and the direction that we're moving in the West is very different from them. They're not moving in any direction. They're kind of entrenched with some very old opinions and beliefs and so forth. But by the time we discussed it, we already had an understanding among ourselves that although we come from very different cultures, we were there because of the common ground that we shared and our belief that individuals who practice shamanism can intercede with spiritual forces to affect positive change and helping balance to return to an unbalanced system. And there were many things that we both believed in, although we had different ways of manifesting it in our cultures and in our daily practices. So we certainly did not interfere with the way that they practice shamanism. We were there as observers or people seeking advice or healing in some cases, and they served us the same way that they would serve anyone who approached them for those purposes. And at the same time, we held our own ceremonies, many of which we did alone because we were just already accustomed to doing things ourselves. But they were always welcome, and occasionally, and more as time went on, they would join in and experience the way that we did things as well. And we had some real, I felt real powerful connections made, and individually people also had some really groundbreaking work.
So, Crow, is the thesis behind the shamanic practice the idea that you can sort of pray our way out of the catastrophe that's happening to our environment?
We don't generally use the term prayer.
I know, but you know what I mean. But that's sort of the net result. Is you put your intention on it, everybody's vibration harmonizes together. It creates a strong force. I mean, we use prayer as a word in the West, but
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. So isn't that?
It's a very similar thing, because what you're doing is you're trying to intercede, with spirit to affect change here in ordinary reality. And that's basically, you can define prayer that way too, I suppose.
Well, don't you think, like, the way you say interconnect with spirit, to me, well, I don't know. Like, I don't think of it like the Western way does. I don't think it's about connecting with spirit. It's more about, like, allowing ourselves to resonate with what we already have, opening that channel up, vibrating on that, turning up the volume on that vibration. Like, we're the radio receptors already. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but is the idea that we could actually, like, vibrate and, like, do, I mean, there's some heavy duty stuff that's happening to our planet. We're losing 1 million birds a month. That's a lot of birds to lose as a planet.
It absolutely is. And that's why, I forget which of the Christian mystics said it, but there is a term, not by prayer alone, or something similar. Without action to accompany your spiritual work, I think you're on a three-wheel wagon, if you will. You really need to follow it with action. And oftentimes, shamanic practitioners with any experience, they are given specific instructions of follow through when they do their journey work. And that means things in ordinary reality, in the here and now, specific things. Sometimes they don't make sense to us necessarily. They might be, to gather a certain plant and use it in a certain way that, most people would have a hard cause and effect understanding of it. But other times it is, it may be to, let me think of an example. Well, for one, me getting more active in this Noyan Mountain. This wasn't just a rational decision I made by exposure. This is something that I felt more and more drawn to, that I've journeyed around, and actually played a part in my interaction with the shamans there. Without them knowing a great deal about me and what my motivations were, I was specifically asked by the oracle, who is the spirit that comes into the shaman as he's working, to work for the land in Mongolia, in specific ways. And this is before we had the conversation about Noyan Mountain, which followed at a campfire several days later. And that's one of those excellent little coincidences. You and I talked about this a little bit beforehand. I'd like to relate that now, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
There was one who struck me from when I first met him as I think I could relate to this guy. You know how some people, you get that first impression.
Yeah.
Anyway, as time went on, it turned out that he spoke Spanish, and I have smatterings of Spanglish, and we were able to communicate a little bit. And
so none of these people spoke English this whole journey?
One of the shamans spoke enough English to get by, but he wasn't comfortable conversing. We had two interpreters. One whose name, she wanted to be called Apple, like the fruit. The meaning of her name is apple in Mongolian, and the sound is similar, but she went by Apple. She was, her mother, I believe, was Tuvan, which is the country just to the north, still under Russian control, and her father was Mongolian. She is an unusual woman in the fact that she's highly educated. She is never married, and her beliefs are very different than the traditional beliefs, and she's very independent. She's also an educator at the university in Ulaanbaatar, so she speaks English very well. And she's quite a firecracker in a lot of ways. Her experience with shamanism was very minimal as far as it being an active part of her life, because she sees herself as being modern, more modern than that. The cultural reality of it playing a part in Mongolian culture, she understands fully, but she just didn't engage in it much. The other interpreter had a little bit of English, but she was fluent in French. And because we had 4 native French speakers in our group, it was very nice to have her along too, because that way, between the 2 interpreters and everyone else with little smatterings of this and that, everybody understood one another fairly well. But to get back to Mugi, the shaman that I gravitated toward, we were around the campfire, and I started to talk a little more specifically about the active part of doing work on behalf of the earth, beyond ceremony and ritual. And I mentioned something about Noyon Mountain, and he was also interested and familiar with Noyon Mountain. And I mentioned the group that I work with, and how I've been doing a series of radio shows where I've mentioned Noyon Mountain. And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I work with someone who is now living in Chicago, and she was going to arrange an interview with me." And I laughed because you and I have spoken about
that. Was the person that I was trying to reach, in other words, because you connected me the last time we spoke. I think her name was Erin, and Erin was trying to connect. We were trying to get like a time when we could all do like a Skype pre-recorded interview, and I guess it got away from us, but we never really connected. But so you met that person that Erin wanted us to meet.
That is the wonderful coincidence, is that the very individual that Erin wanted to translate for one of your shows, you see why, just happened to be one of the 3 shamans that ended up on our trip.
I think we definitely need to make that really happen then.
Well, it's the kind of thing that you begin to think that if I don't follow through on this, something's going to really go wrong.
Yeah.
Or after another has been opening to kind of lead us down the path to accomplish this work. And though many of us are involved with shamanism, this is a very real and present and very worldly concern that we have about Noyon Mountain. And we talked about the mining and things like that. The greed that's involved in these companies coming in, just tearing the earth apart, pulling out what they want, and then walking away. That's horrible. But it doesn't even begin to touch the cultural part of it, the cultural heritage that the Mongolians prize so much is very much tied up with Noyon Mountain. There are burial, you don't want to call them tombs, they're more like barrows. These very large pits would be dug for a burial for a leader. The leader would be placed there with certain goods and so forth, and then everything would be carefully buried. So at the end, there would be no sign that there was a tomb there. Everything would be covered over, and the sites generally were not recorded or shared. So, and the whole intent was that these tombs would remain undisturbed. They even imported the labor to carry on the funerary practice because they had adopted it from the Chinese when they first started to make contact with the Han Dynasty, long ago. And the Mongolians became active in the Silk Route, the trade that went through, and there wasn't just goods that they traded, but it was also practices and life ways. So this is something that goes way back. Genghis Khan himself is in a tomb like that somewhere, but no one knows where it is, thankfully. But many tombs have been opened up and just outright destroyed through these mining operations, and that's not only an insult to the earth, but it's an insult to the culture of the people who have been living in harmony with the earth there for a very long time. So,
well, isn't that how the Western world works? No regard for the past.
well, that is how the oligarchy works. That is what has always been wrong with culture, is that there will be some who have a deep thirst for power and wealth, and to them, nothing else matters. And a lot of other people get pulled into that vortex that they make as they as they charge through life, and they do leave a path of destruction behind oftentimes. And we in the West like to think of ourselves as progressive, and in many ways we are, but it's not, the equity isn't there. In the U.S., if there was a strip mine, there would very likely be enough political pressure to at least make them reclaim and repair the damage, or set the money aside so that could be done.
But like you say, you can have all the money in the world, but you can't replace the culture.
Right.
I mean, this is my concern about why we need people to get much more aggressively and actively engaged in, like, really demanding an end to this pollution that they're perpetrating on us.
Absolutely.
A complete disregard for what they're doing, like the strip mining near Noyon Mountain, the uranium. People going in there after they've exhausted their commercial use, but there's exposure. They leave these mines just gaping wounds on the planet and ignore them.
Right, and they're poisonous pits too. Someone can run across them and not know what's there, and be exposed in such a way that it'll shorten their lives. That's just outright wrong. And here in the U.S., with the water protection efforts that have been going on, in response to the pipelines, the one good thing about that is we live in the U.S., and even though we had a hard time getting proper coverage while that was going on, eventually we broke through, and it did start to get national coverage, and now most people in the United States are aware that there was an issue, and now we're struggling to keep it in the news as these pipes are already starting to leak, and as more pipelines are starting to be built, and I'm feeling that I definitely support the water protectors here in the United States, but I also am absolutely a global citizen, and I want people to know, and I want people to see that the bad guys who are operating here are everywhere. They're all over the world, and that we have to protect everything regardless of political boundaries and cultural differences and so forth. The earth is the mother of us all, and we really need to work on her behalf, because there are so many people now that are so moved by greed that they're blind. They don't see, or they don't care about the destruction they're leaving behind. So
it's a deep issue. I mean, that's the issue, is how do you confront those people that really do have the power to change it, to reverse it, to stop it, when really all they really care about, very anthropocentric point of view, they feel they have a right to destroy everything. And Mother Earth, that the planet isn't, the fact that we call it Mother Earth, they find offensive. To them, it's just a planet. Mm-hmm. And, they believe in a God that's outside there, and that this is ours to destroy. I mean, they're planning on going to another planet. That's how insane they are.
Yeah. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, who most people know as being one of the spokesmen of science, particularly astrophysics nowadays, he points out that it is so ludicrous to even begin to make plans to go to the next place when the resources required to go to the next place and terraform another planet are far less than it would take for us to fix our home, and to start to take steps to protect our home. Why people think that we can, it's that throwaway mentality, it's used up, toss it, move on to the next thing. Well, we can't do that with planets, and we shouldn't do that, because the Earth is our mother. It does have a spiritual force and a life of its own, And it's my belief that the Earth will persevere. We may damage its surface, but we as a species, if we wipe ourselves out and a lot of other species with us, eventually new life will arise. The Earth lives on a different time scale. Just the fact that we're doing these terrible things is I'll use a biblical term, an abomination.
I think it's a lie. I mean, I call them nuclear liars. They're liars. We are not throwing things away. It's not like we can we live on a planet. You're not throwing, this is one of the offenses about a lot of food that is being pushed on Westerners is food. The additives that we're putting in, they're just waste products. Like fluoride is a waste product of the nuclear cycle, frankly. That's where it all came from, all of that, I think. I mean, it's horrendous that we're thinking that we can just keep using this up. And, right now what flame retardant is in everybody's blood. Yeah. It's not being thrown away. It's being put into, that's the thing. This is where we're at is I think the more traditional cultures are more honest about their place on the planet, really their relationship with what we're living on, because we're being sold this idea that we can just throw things out and start again and do it over again. And we're not being told about the coal mines in, where is it, the Congo, or I beg your pardon, I should know the country in Africa. But there is a metal. It's like a metal that they dig out of the earth, a mineral, and it's called coltan. And they are killing 45,000 people a month in guerrilla warfare, basically forcing people to mine this. And what we use it for is in our laptops. Yep. Now, people who use laptops don't even know about that.
Yeah, and a lot of these things are used in the phones, too. And we go through phones now
Well, we're forced to. I mean, the phones sort of outdate themselves. Yeah. Your phone breaks. You can't go to the company and say, hey, I like my phone. I want to keep it. They're like, sorry, we don't fix it, but you can buy a new one for $600 and we'll let you pay for it over 2 years. And that's your option. That's really your only option. Or you can go to some guy maybe at the mall to fix your phone.
Yeah.
And then they outdate the computer services. It's I don't know. The whole thing is just this malicious. It's malicious. It's really malicious cycle. Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes left. You must have been completely thrilled to be in a space for an extended period of time with people on a harmonic level for an extended period of time.
I'll tell you, I think every one of us came back a changed person in some way. Being out there, this one day, we included some visits to Buddhist monasteries on the itinerary as a break from the normal day-to-day stuff. And on one of these trips, I didn't go. I stayed behind, and I took a walk. And it turned out to be probably nearly 20 kilometers out and back in the sun, without water, without shoes. And there was a point on that walk where I could not see any signs of any other life except bones and one partially eaten carcass. And I just felt so alone, but at the same time so connected to my surroundings. I can't begin to describe the catharsis that I went through. It was really magical for me. I don't know. Trying to explain it is not going to
Well, my question is, how'd you know your way back?
Some people are better at that than others. I mean,
because 20 kilometers is a long ways.
It was a long way, and there were enough hills that I couldn't even see where I came from. But I did, I could, the sun was out, so I could get the general direction. I didn't come back exactly the same way I went out. But once I got to the top of a rise, and I was most of the way back, I could see the camp that we were staying at. Okay. I
know when I go out hiking, I leave little markers and then I pull them off when I come back that same way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
I have actually gotten lost in the forest here in Oregon. Like, you go on like a little public thing. It's a public path, but still there's different options. So you end up, I don't know, I ended up getting lost. So after that one time of getting lost in the forest, I'm like, now I bring markers with me in my pocket and I just tag it to a tree, and that tells me how to get back home. So this is an incredible journey, Crow. I hope that we can, the person that you met, what's his name?
his name was Mugi Siempre. Is the whole name that I know of his. We have exchanged emails and so forth. Now, Mugi, let me just make one observation about modern Mongolian shamans. Like in the past, they always did other things as well, but in the in today's world, a lot of them have modern jobs, and Mugi is actually an economist when he's not doing shamanic work. Han Sono, who is one of the three, is actually a medical doctor. He doesn't have a medical practice, but he works in a hospital now, and he had the medical school training. And Bowie, the third one, I don't remember exactly. It might come to me, but he also has a more traditional profession as well. But Mongolian culture allows for them to leave their jobs whenever they are called to shamanic work. And in this case, they left their jobs for about 15 days in order to travel with us. So it's very interesting. Well, Mugi also spent 3 years in Cuba, where he learned to speak Spanish, and that will be helpful, I think, awesome. in our future conversations with him. I am going to renew my efforts with your help to have Aaron and Mugi on the program so they can speak directly toward the issues at Noyan, because one of the things that disease hates is to be exposed, and then the disease of greed and avarice that's behind all this mining and all this fossil fuel exploitation and so forth. The term I like to use is that the best disinfectant is sunlight. The more people who know what is happening and who is doing it, the better chance we have to have people listen when we suggest what can we do now.
Dr. John Goffman said it's very important to get to know the names of the people running these corporations in the current time, because it's not a corporation. Like, it's not Exelon, it's a person at that top of the food chain making these decisions.
That's why there are corporations, is to have that mask. And right. If we take that mask off, it's going to make it necessary for people to make a reckoning of their behavior. So remember this name, Centerra, Centerra. It's a Canadian company, and it is one of the leading strip miners in Noyan. And you're going to hear that name again, I'm sure, when we have a program specifically focused on Noyan Mountain. But for anyone who's listening that is interested, you can start to look at these companies. It's a Canadian company. A lot of the stuff that's going on in what we would refer to the third world or the Far East, the bad stuff is being perpetrated by the global oligarchs, and many of them live right here. Many of them might be live in your towns, or certainly in your state. So let's take some masks off.
I just looked online, and there was a story from 2015 from uranium-network.org, and it says Mongolians go on a hunger strike to protect Noyan Mountain from unlawful mining.
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
And many of them were shamans, and actually, at the end of that particular hunger strike, some of them were removed from the protest site by police, by force, ostensibly for their own protection, because they have, had gone without food and were in danger. but still, it does show the level of fear that it's causing to have people stand up and draw attention. When you have to call the police to pull people away. So.
Well, it's interesting. In this article, it says, the strike is a reaction to changes and attempts to abolish the, quote, law with the long name, unquote, which protects Mongolian water sources and ore deposits from unlawful mining operations. And this is interesting because the law with the long name, I'm sure that's something they came up with. We actually have a law with a long name right now that people need to be calling. It's that, I don't know if I talked to you about it, but it's called the Nuclear Waste Policy Amendment Act of 2017. And they're calling it the Shimkus Bill because he created it. And there are now something like 27 representatives who are co-sponsoring it, Democratic and Republican. And it will take away our water rights from the federal government. Will no longer have water rights in regards to nuclear waste. The corporations that we sell the nuclear waste to will have more rights to the water than we do. Right.
So we're basically, their politicians are selling our political soul, not our political soul, but our, selling bits and pieces of our soul to the private industries for exchange for lobby money.
Well, the idea behind this law is so that it actually saves the government money, because it's expensive to deal with nuclear waste, uranium waste. It's very, very expensive.
There's good reason for that. And it shouldn't be done. That's the simplest solution, is it shouldn't be done at all. There's no reason for it. In this day and age with the technology we have, we do not need to rely on nuclear for anything.
Yeah, and we don't need strip mining. We don't need this. I mean, honestly, it's completely outrageous that we are allowing this destruction of our planet to go on when we know about it.
And so let's keep working. And thank you, Lonnie, for making this time available to talk about this. It's difficult to get these things out in the public the public view. And if it weren't for your program, I don't know where I would go with my fight. And I thank you very much for the chance.
You're welcome, and I hope we can get Moogie back on, do an interview with him within the next few weeks. That would be super awesome if we could do something like that. Well, I'll tell you what, it's very interesting that you are from the East Coast of the United States, traveling to Mongolia, and yet the issues are the exact same thing that we're dealing with here. It really is just straight out greed and avarice, just doing everything it can to make us feel like we're helpless and we can do nothing. And I get this idea that shamanism really is it's a powerful force. It's not the only force, but it is a powerful force.
Indeed it is. And we're going to keep on working.
Well, look, everybody, you can go to Shamanic Voyages. Let me see at the site. It says SacredVoyages.com. That's your spot.
No, it's Shamanic Voyages. Yeah,
Shamanic Voyages.
In there, accidentally, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, ShamanicVoyages.com, and we have a few links on our blog page there. I haven't updated it since we've been back from Mongolia, but that will be
on Facebook. That's the best place to find you.
Yeah, Facebook has the link to our website too. Yeah, so it's Shamanic Voyages on
Well,
Facebook.
I have to cut us off. We have about 10 seconds. Thank you, Crow, for joining us. Everybody, put your courage feet on. Take action. We'll talk with you on Monday. Thanks for joining us.